I want to talk with you for the remainder of the night about what is sustainable business and the technical challenges of sustainable business, which means what are the technologies that are needed for businesses to become more sustainable, the financial issues that are key to sustainability. The fourth topic will be the organizational and management challenges, and finally the role of government and public policy in helping to promote business sustainability. And this is going to be the same framework you're going to see throughout the rest of the semester. I'll talk about technology, finance, management, and policy and politics. That framework is really how I looked at all of the sustainability issues in the new book, Sustainability Management, that you're previewing this semester. So what is sustainable business? Now, originally, as I mentioned in the first hour, environmental protection, regulated pollution through end-of-the-pipeline add-ons. The factory was there, it spewed stuff into the environment, and we developed some kind of control technology to treat the emissions or the effluent. We didn't think about stopping the stuff from being produced or changing production processes. We basically focused on pollution control. And this is a first-generation approach to environmental protection. You see this in the 1970s and 1980s. One of the problems here is that conceptually, this is what locked in this idea in people's minds that there was a trade-off between environmental protection and economic growth. Retrofits added cost to the production process. Okay, you had your factory, it produced something, the waste you didn't think about, and you didn't worry about, and you didn't pay for. So you just dumped the stuff on the side of the road. You know, in a way, that was how early industrial societies lived. That's how, I mean, in New York City, garbage used to be thrown on the street. Then it got thrown into the waterways. And then we dug a big hole for it in Staten Island, and we put it there. Then the hole got filled up, and now we send it to holes in the ground in Virginia and Pennsylvania. And now the cost of these things is going up, so we have to start paying some attention to that. But environmental protection and a concern for sustainability were seen as money losers, not money makers. You're not going to make money doing this. It's going to cost you money. So what changes? What changes is you start to think about pollution as a form of waste. If pollution is waste, then if I can produce less waste, then I can make more money. If you think about a normal factory, and factory like a bicycle factory, where the stuff goes down the production line, and then at the end of the production line, if the bicycle isn't suitable for market, it gets thrown into the redo bin. It gets thrown into a different part of the factory where it gets scavenged for parts. But that whole cost of producing that bicycle and putting it in the redo bin adds to the price of the things that actually are made well. And this was actually one of the fundamental management insights of Deming, where he looked at American car manufacturers and started to advise the Japanese. And the story I sometimes tell about this was I bought a Duster in the mid-1970s when I was in graduate school. And when I bought the Duster, it was a great car. It was like a truck, stick on the floor and no power steering. You know, parallel parking of this thing was better than any kind of lifting you could do in a gym. But the thing about the car is when I bought it, the guy says to me, listen, I want you to keep a pad and paper on the seat next to you for the first 3 or 4 weeks with the car, and you just write down anything wrong with the car, and if the car has a defect, I guarantee you we'll fix it. So I took my pad, I left it on the side, and so the windshield wipers didn't work, not life-threatening. One of the windows didn't crank right, and there were little things, 6 or 7 little things. And at the end of 3 weeks, I brought it in for the first checkup, and they fixed everything. And so I drove away. I was a happy customer. What do I know? So then I bought a Honda in the mid-'80s. And I finish the deal, and I say to the Honda dealer, so I'll keep a pad on the seat next to me, and I'll write down anything that's wrong with the car, and you guys will fix it, right? And the guy looked at me like I had done something horrible to him. And he said, there will be nothing wrong with this car. This car is perfect. And I said, yeah, he's a car salesman. That's perfect. So I drove around for several weeks with the pad, and there's nothing on it. The car is perfect. And it started to occur to me that when I bought the Duster, I was still helping them make the car. I was the quality control inspector. But the Honda got to me, and it was all working, okay? And what they had done with the Honda is that they looked at every aspect of the car over time. So if a windshield wiper motor worked 70,000 times and they could make it work 90,000 by changing a little brush in it, they would put the brush in. And they did this to every part of the car over a long period of time. And the Japanese cars, which in the 1970s were seen as of inferior quality, soon became the standard because they applied these processes to thinking about the production line. So if you think about it then, you don't, in the case of pollution, you don't want to treat and decontaminate waste. You want to drive it out of the production process, because that means you're using something in the course of production that you're not selling. Isn't the idea when you make something to sell it and make money off of it? So if I'm spewing it into the environment or trying to dump it into the river, that means I'm not using it in production. And so that's one of the core concepts of sustainability management, that you want to be parsimonious in your use of resources, not because you're, Pete Seeger or because you're thinking about the environment, but because you don't want to pay for stuff you're not going to use, and you want to sell everything that you buy, and that you want to make sure your production processes work that way. So as this kind of thinking goes into organizations, you start to eliminate the growth environment trade-off. In fact, the goal is to start getting people to think about the environment as the source of wealth, that you actually want to use it as efficiently as possible. So what are the technical challenges then of sustainable business? The first is that we don't know how to do this all the time, okay? Sustainable business requires closed system production. This is what's the field of industrial ecology. All of your inputs, after you process them, come out as product. So you don't throw anything out, okay? There's no, if you're producing something and there's steam that's produced in the process, you capture the steam and you use it to turn a turbine and generate electricity instead of spewing it out into the environment. If there's a chemical effluent that comes out, take a look at what's in that chemical effluent and see, can we separate this in the production process and sell it to somebody who needs that chemical instead of sending it into the Hudson River? All resources are used in production in this way of thinking, and all products then are designed for reuse. In other words, it's a design issue. So we send this computer out into the marketplace. After 18 months, the computer is no longer sellable, right? Or actually, this is probably a better example, okay? I mean, how long do these things last now? I mean, on your contracts, every 2 years, you get a free one, right? So the whole system has been geared up for you to replace these things. What do you do with the old BlackBerries, with the old, iPhones? Where do they? Anybody here have an old iPhone that they had to get rid of this year? Where did it go? Only 2 people got rid of an iPhone this year? Come on. I have a drawer in my desk at home that's filled with these things. I've got a dozen, I've got the flip phone and but the point is, they're not designed to be taken back and remanufactured, and they could be, okay? That could be part, imagine if in the cost of production, there was actually a system for reuse. Now you have it in toner from HP, right? You put that, basically printers have become toner holders. Okay, the printer costs $80, the toner costs $80. This is not an unusual commercial practice. Razor blades were the first of these things. The razor blade costs more than what holds it. because they're really in the business of selling razor blades, and so they basically give away the actual shaver, okay? The point here is when the product's done, can you take it back and use it again? And toner is very toxic, and they've even got a system now where the box of the new one, you put the old one in, right? And UPS comes at their normal pickup time when they're delivering something, they take it back in most offices, okay? That's an example. Now, why does HP do this? Because they're nice people and they care about the environment? I'm sure they're nice people and they care about the environment. But they're doing it because they can take that old packaging, pour some more toner in, and sell it again, and sell it again, and sell it again. And so, in that respect, you have a sustainable business. Now, many manufacturing technologies, though, have been built on the expectation that waste disposal was less expensive than reuse, and it still is. The cost of collection and of bringing that stuff back, what a pain in the neck. Let's just get rid of it. We don't need this stuff again, right? So that's the problem technically. You have to create the technologies around the product that make it clear that by reusing it and remanufacturing it and recycling it, the manufacturer will actually save money. And as natural resources get more expensive, and as some of these elements become scarcer, you'll see more and more of this. And you already see it, for example, in the tire business. We now do, in fact, pay to have our tires taken. So what are the other technical challenges? The need to design into a product an easier method of reusing the product a second time. Now, that has to become a design specification. If the people who are engineering and designing the product don't think about it, it's not going to get done. So whether it's a refrigerator or it's an air conditioner or it's a computer. Now, in some cases, all you can do is use parts of it, but even that's better than just throwing the whole thing out. Reuse and reduced resource consumption have to become design specifications for people making products. And can this be done? Yeah. We've integrated lots of new ideas into work processes. I mean, I use the example of safety. Occupational health and safety is something that, best example I know of is firefighting. Firefighters now have oxygen tanks when they go into fighting a fire. Why? Because the stuff inside houses is increasingly toxic when it burns. But for a long time, they didn't have it. So in New York City, the average age of mortality for a firefighter is 62 years old. And so the average age of mortality for the rest of us is closer to 80. And so they've incorporated into their work processes over time more and more of a concern for safety. So is Con Ed, so have many, many industrial factories. Part of it's OSHA and their role, but part of it is actually the factories themselves, combination of regulation and thinking about, we're not trying to kill our people here, changing working conditions. Computers and other electronics that are designed for short life cycles need to be changed for either longer lasting, so you can plug in the new software. Wouldn't it be better if the older computers could run the next couple of generations of software? Because in a way, they're not really advanced. I mean, they are advancing in the sense that computer memory and computer processing time is technologically advancing and getting cheaper and better all the time, and that's part of why. And then a software designer says, hey, I can put something else on this I couldn't do before, and that's why over time, 18 months, 24 months, you want to get rid of what you have. Maybe there's a way to do that a little bit differently. Okay, so those are the technical issues. The basic problem is we don't know how to do it all the time, okay? And that's where, and in some cases we know how to do it, but the design specifications for the product haven't been put in there yet. Air conditioners may be one of the best examples I know of a place where design specifications were added over the last decade to the manufacturing of air conditioners, making them far more energy efficient than they were before. So that if you have an air conditioner that's over 5 years old and you buy a new one, you'll pay for that air conditioner in saved energy by the time you're finished with the second summer, if not sooner, depending on how often you use the thing. Okay, so let's talk about the financial side, which is the next part. Now, businesses that use fewer resources and produce less waste, in theory, should be lower cost. But here's the reality. You have sunk cost. You have capital in place. If you're the sanitation department of the city of New York, you got all those trucks, okay? You're going to be using them for a while before their natural life cycle ends, and you're going to replace them. Now, it's the replacement point where you have an opportunity. And you've seen that in New York City with taxi cabs. I had a group at SEPA that worked a few years ago on helping the City Council of New York writing the new rules that encourage the use of hybrid taxi cabs, okay? Taxi cabs get replaced very frequently because these guys drive them in 3 shifts on New York City streets, and they get beaten up pretty badly, and so the replacement cycle is pretty quick. And so that's a place where you can do something in a hurry. On the other hand, sanitation trucks and other kinds of heavy material like that can take a long time before they're ready for replacement. And so you have to be able to encourage that. Now, one of the things government could do is you could make the depreciation rules and other tax incentives in place to allow that turnover for more sustainable technologies. That's a way you could accelerate some of these kinds of things. The other thing is newness sells. People don't want to use, they don't want a certified reused Mercedes. They want the new Mercedes, right? All of you Mercedes owners out there probably can talk about this, but people like something new, okay? Something that's tried and true and reused, people sometimes don't like. And so part of the financial issue here is Xerox has to convince its people, its consumers rather, that it's in their interest to buy something that's been reconditioned, or at least some of the parts were used before. The other problem is that's also fundamental is that sustainability savings tend to be long-term, but business and politics and everything else is organized around short-term revenues, expenses, and profits. And so if it's not going to get me a rapid return, then I'm not interested in it. That's one part of the financial issue. The other is capital costs. Now, capital, you have to think about capital like it's a, like it sort of rolls downhill toward the highest rate of return. Whereas if I can get an 8% return from your business and a 6% from yours, even if yours is sustainable, I'm going to go for the 8%. And then within the business, if the rate of return of invested capital is higher for non-sustainable investments than for sustainable investments, or perceived as higher, it doesn't even have to be higher, the capital won't go to the renewable resource or to the sustainability investment. And particularly in a time when capital's scarce, and we're just coming out of that period right now in the American economy and the world economy, then these investments may not be attractive enough to compete for scarce resources. So that it might be profitable, but not profitable enough. And that's the kind of thing that you have to ask yourself and you have to look at. And again, government can play a role in this. So if you think about something like municipal bonds have a very healthy market because the federal government and the state governments and local governments don't tax the interest on that. And so if I invest in those kinds of bonds and I make $10,000 of profit, I don't have to pay any tax on that $10,000. That means that the government can charge a lower rate when they go to the bond market, which makes it a more attractive investment for everybody. That kind of tax expenditure by the government can move along socially responsible investments, and that's something that needs to be used here. The other issue is uncertain return because of new technologies. Some of the technologies needed for sustainability, remember the other side of what I just said before, that we don't know how to do some of these things. As we develop ways of doing these things, they're going to be new, and new technologies will have a less certain rate of return. It increases the level of risk and can discourage companies from allocating capital to sustainability initiatives. So this is the financial challenge of sustainability management, that you're dealing with new technologies and uncertain returns, longer-term payoffs rather than shorter-term payoffs, all of which can lead to problems here. So now we've talked about the technology, We've talked about the finance. Let's talk about organizations and management. Again, this came up during your discussion of the case studies earlier. Sometimes you need a dramatic change in management culture to bring about sustainability initiatives. I talked about this before. An organization with an aggressive damn the torpedo, approach to work processes, waste is just the cost of doing business, needs to slow down and think and adapt some of the things that we heard about in the first hour. But they're too busy, being out there making decisions and making things happen. And we can't really worry about how much energy we're using, because energy is just a sort of side idea here. We're interested in whatever business we're in. Organizations that think of wasted water, energy, and resource use as breakage or simply the cost of doing business sometimes require a complete cultural transformation. The people inside the organization have to adopt different values. And so new standard operating procedures must be developed, and new technologies have to be learned and adopted. It's not just that the technology has to exist. The people in the organization have to know how to use it. They have to know how to take those technologies and put them to work during the work processes, okay? Just like, HP may send you, the box to put your toner in, but if you throw the toner in the garbage, that whole thing doesn't work. You have to put the toner in the box, you have to seal the box, put the label on it, and wait for UPS to come and get it. And if you don't like doing that, or you don't know how to do it, or you can't be bothered with it, it won't happen. And those are standard operating procedures. Every organization, as I said earlier, is built on those things. So staff have to be trained to understand how to perform the new tasks and how to use the new equipment. And management has to learn how to supervise these new tasks without loss of production momentum. You can't end up producing less while you're learning how to do this stuff. You've got to learn how to do this stuff and keep producing at the same level that you were producing before. The changing technological base of modern production and the impact of rapid communication, along with the global economy, put organizations under enormous pressure. In other words, organizational life is harder now. People work longer hours. They got these things tethered to them. They're expected to respond. I'm going to be watching the Yankees later on, hopefully beating Minnesota. And I'll be sitting there with this thing in case one of my supervisors decides that they need to ping me with something. I know a lot of people live that way now, and it's not fun. So add to that, and now you also want me to worry about putting my toner in a box? Go away. I got enough to do. You have a 24/7 global economy with people in the financial world waking up in the middle of the night because of markets in other parts of the world. You have products that are requiring you to ship things from everywhere and manufacture them everywhere else. And now we're going to add to that this other variable. And for some people, it's just overload. Sustainability is not the only challenge faced by modern organizations. But here's the point I would make about it. Just like the companies that needed to adapt to the web and to containerized shipping and to the global network of production and services, so too will organizations need to adapt to this. In other words, the point that I'll be making throughout this semester, and you've heard me say it a few times, is that excellent management is going to be sustainability management. You're not going to be able to get away with wasting water and product and energy and dumping pollution into the river in the next 10 or 20 years if you're going to be a successful manager. And you see in the best-run corporations that this is part of how they're thinking about themselves now. This is not, it's a revolution, but it's not something that is really that outlandish. It's really part of how the best-run companies are thinking about themselves. And so you're going to see more and more of this going on. So there's a management challenge, but I think it's going to be met. You look at companies like Shell Oil or like Pepsi or like Walmart and a whole bunch of other organizations. They're thinking about this now. It's part of how their top management is approaching organizational management. So then that brings me to government, which is the thing I actually probably know the best in terms of my own expertise. How do we make this happen in the private sector, in the governmental sector? One of the interesting things that I saw in the Times yesterday, I don't know if I assume many of you read this, was the military in Afghanistan is starting to think about using renewable energy in their combat operations for a whole set of interesting reasons. One is its lower cost. Two is that the oil tankers and the trucks keep getting blown up and are very vulnerable targets. And three, they think that this kind of practice will make them a more effective fighting force, because then they also don't have to wait for unreliable resources to arrive. Okay, so now we see something very interesting happening in sustainability, which is the government itself, which is a huge purchaser of all sorts of technology, will be forcing this technology into the marketplace, because when the military buys solar cells or water purification units, solar water purification units, they buy a lot of them. And they buy a lot of them in a hurry. Now, one of the things that came up in this article in the paper yesterday was that some of these technologies are unproven, and they're a little nervous about them. But the military people are saying the benefits outweigh the cost. Even if we have some failure here, it's better than the way we're operating. And so government, as a consumer of goods and services, can play an enormous role. Government structures incentives through the tax codes and disincentives through regulation. One of the reasons why companies stop dumping toxic waste into the ground next door or into the river is that under the Superfund bill, they were now subject to joint, strict, and several liability, which means that if I dumped something next door, and even if there were other people dumping, all they have to do is find mine. I'm now responsible for the whole dump site. I'm responsible for cleaning it up and for any damages to people who were exposed to this stuff. Now that tells me that I better protect myself by being a little bit better environmental steward. The other issue is using the tax code because of the financial issues I mentioned before. If we could use the tax code creatively, we could attract a lot more capital into this kind of R&D and into this kind of product use. And finally, you need the government itself to fund the research. And this is, I'm executive director of the Earth Institute. We get over 80% of our money, which is $120 million a year from the federal government. So the federal government should give us more. That's what I think. I think it should give us more. We can develop more cutting-edge technologies. So that's part of what government has to do. Government has to play a role in developing the technology, in developing the incentives through the tax code and through regulation, and government has to, through its purchasing power, become a consumer. Okay. So sustainability management then, I talked about the technical challenges, the financial challenges, the organizational challenges, the issues for government and public policy. So again, this is a pattern you should get familiar with throughout the semester. So let me conclude here. Sustainability is a key management concept. As important or more important than financial management, information management, strategy, marketing, and organizational management. And those are the first couple of weeks of the semester, I talked to you about the fundamentals of management. And here's a way to think about it, though. These physical dimensions of sustainability, these constraints that come from resource use and waste, are as fundamental as any other management constraint or opportunity an organization faces. And you need to be thinking about management as including these kinds of issues. It can't be ignored or assumed away. Economists are always saying, assume this or assume that, all things held equal, okay? Well, resources and waste can no longer be held equal because there are almost 7 billion people on the planet. Our use of resources is growing exponentially. And if we don't start managing ourselves and managing the planet, managing this production function, we are going to start destroying the ability for it to provide for us. To the extent that we use fossil fuels and one-time resources, whatever they are, whether it's iron or whether it's coal or whether it's oil, these are substances that were created geologically and aren't coming back once we use them and dump them into a landfill. I actually believe that probably 100 years from now, we're going to mine landfills for their resources because it's going to be cheaper than trying to find the stuff in the rest of the planet. But think about the opportunity we have now by building into the production cycle as much reuse as possible, and also building the production cycle on renewable. You know, photosynthesis, solar power are the fundamental basis for resources that will come back, okay? And so if we need to think about that as the basis for our economy. I believe that all competent business management will soon be sustainability management, and I'll say this again, all competent managers will be sustainability managers, because, you know, can you manage an organization without understanding a financial statement, without accounting? Can you manage an organization without understanding people and doing human resource management or information or strategy? No. So why do you think you can manage an organization without understanding the physical dimensions of the organization's resource use, its use of resources, and its production of waste? Of course you have to know that. Every manager is going to need to know it, whether you're the president of a university, the dean of a school, or you're the head of a hotel or Kroger. You're going to need to understand these kinds of things, and you need to be competent in it.